And welcome back, everyone, to episode 11 of the Sports Coverage Podcast. My name is Andrew, and I'm alongside my co host, Jack, for this week. You know, we had Dylan last week, and now we have Jack back on. You may remember him from episode 4. Vince will hopefully be back in the coming weeks, but let's enjoy our guest while we have him. So, first of all, we're going to start off with the NFL. Jack, you're a big Jets fan, and we're going to talk a little bit about a move that the Jets made a little later. But first, we're going to
Yep.
hop right in with Thursday Night Football. So, the Jacksonville Jaguars played the New Orleans Saints, and it ended in a 31-24 Jags victory. Anything you noticed in that game?
Yeah, I mean, both sides played their hearts out that game. And, if you looked at the final play, the game that decided the game was the Saints were close to the end zone. Did you see that play where Carr threw it to the tight end and he just dropped it
Yeah.
in his hands? That kind of basically called the game right there. And the Saints had it in their hands.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it was a winnable game for the Saints. And, both these teams have looked up and down to start the season. So I think that this was definitely a pivotal moment for the Jags, especially on the running side of the ball. Trevor Lawrence wasn't the one who ended up having the majority of the touchdowns in this game. So I think it was good for the Jags to kind of show that they're an all-around team. And same for the Saints. They were really able to keep up with them, which I thought was impressive, especially for the
Yeah,
Saints team.
definitely.
We saw Derek Carr get a little bit heated there on the sideline towards the end of the game, which was definitely understandable since they came so close to beating such a good team. So do you think there's anything going on with that, or do you think what changes do you think he may be looking to make in the coming weeks?
I mean, I don't know. Carr played as good as he can. That Saints team it's they're pretty unpredictable this season. One, they could shut out a team the next week and they can get shut out. Really,
Yeah.
there's nothing they can change right now besides Kamara's health and his, well-being because Kamara's not really doing that well this season. So maybe you want to invest in a new running back next season. And obviously Michael Thomas isn't doing very well. So I don't know. Maybe they might have to start over and rebuild.
Yeah, and speaking of health, especially in the NFL, we have a ton more injuries that we need to go over real quick, starting with the biggest one and someone that we talked about a lot going into the season. Anthony Richardson is going to be out for the season after an injury to his AC joint in his right shoulder and then having season ending surgery on it. So Gardner Minshew will now be the starting QB for the Colts. So, do you think he's capable enough to lead this team? Because they look pretty good. Jonathan Taylor's back now. Anthony Richardson, I think, was a key piece because he had rushing. He was able to throw the ball. He was kind of an all around guy. So, do you think they're going to be a lot more rushing forward with Jonathan Taylor now back and with Gardner Minshew maybe being a little shaky?
I do think so, but I feel like Minshew also has some potential. Remember, he was the starting quarterback for Jacksonville for for 2 years, and he didn't play that great. But now he's with the Colts. I feel like he's a great fit with the Colts. He's one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league. I feel like you could rely on him. But yeah, I definitely feel like they will focus on Jonathan Taylor a lot more.
Yeah, and do you think they still have a chance at the playoffs now with this pretty big wrench being thrown into their plans?
Yeah, I think they still have an option at the playoffs. They're struggling right now. The division's obviously pretty mid. But at the same time, I feel like they have a chance to get in.
Yeah, I agree, and it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out over the next couple of weeks. Two other injuries that are going to affect this weekend's games. Justin Fields will not be playing in the Bears game against the Raiders after suffering a thumb injury, and the same could be said for Jimmy G, who will be playing against the Bears, and he will not be playing because of a back injury. So it's going to be a battle of the backup quarterbacks there with the Bears versus the Raiders. Who do you think is going to come out on top with all of that kind of being thrown into both their games?
For this game, I know I'm this is a very complicated game. One, the Bears are kind of struggling this season as well. So are the Raiders. But you know what? I'm gonna go the Raiders on this one. I'm gonna say the Raiders pick up a victory this weekend. I don't know. I just think it's their weekend this week.
And it's been interesting watching how Devonte Adams has played out for them over the past couple weeks because he is arguably one of the best receivers in the league, and we've seen him only get a couple targets in each of the last two games with Jimmy G coming back after his injury a couple weeks ago. So I think it might be interesting to see if they're going to really start leaning into him a little more. And but if do you think there's a reason for why they aren't, or do you think it's just that they're not really looking at him?
I really think I really think they're gonna, make him more of a target because I feel like he's a very key part of this team. So I could see why they're starting to use him more a little bit. So, because one, he's a very good player. Two, he's a valuable part of the player on the team. So you have to use him. You're giving him a lot of money, and you're expecting him to do much. And I definitely think he can do a lot for this team.
Yeah, I definitely agree. But we're going to look at Sunday Night Football real quick, which is going to be a very interesting game. Dolphins at Eagles, which is an 8:20 primetime game. Both teams are 5-1, and the Eagles are coming off a loss to your Jets, which I'm sure you're very proud of. And the Dolphins won last week against the yet to win Panthers. So this is going to be whoever ends up winning this game is going to be huge for either of those teams. And this is definitely going to shape the future of the playoff picture. So, do you think that this could potentially be a Super Bowl 58 matchup?
By far, yes. Dolphins, such an amazing team. Struggled quite against the Buffalo, though. My only concern with Miami is that they've played pretty mid teams throughout the season, and Buffalo was really probably the best team they faced. So I don't know. We'll have to see how they do with good teams. Hopefully my Jets can beat them. If they do, then I definitely feel like we also have a chance at making the playoffs. But yeah, I think it's a pretty realistic Super Bowl 58 matchup. They both have great talents.
Yeah, and there was a lot of news about Eagles injuries, kind of a lot of guys questionable, Darius Slay, Devontae, all those guys, but they are all good to play tomorrow, which could definitely be interesting for the Miami offense and defense because that affects both of them. So, do you have anyone in this game?
I'm going to say Philadelphia wins this one by a little bit. I think it's going to be a really offensive controlled game. So both teams have a top 10 offense in the league. I'm going to say Eagles come out with this one by at least 7 points in this game, at least 7.
All right. I think that's an interesting take. I'm gonna not agree with you. I'm gonna go with the Dolphins. I think that the Eagles looked very shaky last week. Jalen Hurts was definitely upset at the end of that game. A lot of memes coming out of that. But I I don't believe that the Eagles right now, especially after the loss last week, are a team that can beat Miami. Miami has probably the fastest team in the league. Their
Definitely.
defense is their defense is pretty insane. And we've seen the Eagles struggle against good and bad defenses over the past year or however long they've been that good. So
Definitely.
I'm gonna go with Miami. I think they're gonna edge it out, but it's still gonna be a close game no matter what.
Yeah, by far.
So, talking about your Jets, they're sending wide receiver McCole Hardman to the Chiefs in exchange for a 2025 sixth round draft pick and a 2025 seventh round pick. So, Hardman began his career in 2019 with the Chiefs. Anything to say about this move?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of disappointed in the Jets for not using him enough. I definitely feel like he would have been a key part of this offense, and I'm kind of disappointed that they didn't use him enough. He only had one catch in his entire 6 weeks as a Jet, and now they're sending him back to his home. Best of luck to him out there, but I definitely feel like we could have used him more.
Yeah, I agree. And we've seen a little bit of wide receiver struggle, but that might just be because of your quarterback over like the start of the season. And we've seen Alan Lazard kind of step up over the last couple games. He had a really
Yeah,
good game a couple weeks ago. Garrett Wilson starting to perform again. But I think that wide receiver room could have really benefited from keeping McCall Hardman. But
yeah,
I think it's definitely an interesting move that they could have made.
yeah, definitely.
So we're going to move on to NCAA. And as always, we're going to do our game of the week. So, Jack, I'll let you go first. And I think you're going to talk about where game day is this week. And I think this is a very good pick. So, what do you think about your
So
game?
my game of the week is Penn State versus Ohio State. This is obviously one of the best rivalries in college football. It's on right now at the time we're recording. It's already shaping up to be a really great game. Penn State 6-0, Ohio State 6-0. They're both in the top 10. Ohio State's number 3, Penn State's number 7. This game will be a dogfight. It already is, and it's just a matter of who wants it more. And I'm gonna go Penn State on this one.
Yeah. And the game has already looked interesting. I watched the first quarter. I think it was 3-3 when I last saw it. I don't know what it's at right
Yep.
now. As always,
It's
guys, we film. Yeah.
It's 10-3, I believe, Ohio State right now.
Nice. So, as always, we film this. Oh, it's 10-6 now at halftime. But as
Okay,
always, we
sorry.
film the show on Saturdays. So we're kind of like in the middle of the game. So you guys will know what happened by the time this episode comes out. So my game of the week, I've talked about Alabama a lot in the last couple weeks. I'm a Bama fan. And last year's game against Tennessee didn't go too hot. So it's a 3:30 game, Alabama versus Tennessee. There were a lot of storylines around that. They stormed the field. I think they picked up the 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 poles and brought them to the river and like dumped them in the river or something, which is just a little crazy. But they deserved it last year. They hit that game-winning field goal, and that's something that we saw happen twice to Alabama last year. So if Alabama loses this game, our playoff hopes are over, title hopes are over for this year. Tennessee,
Yeah.
I think, is going to be thrown up a good amount in the rankings if they win here. I'm going to keep Alabama. Last week against Arkansas, week before, especially against Texas A&M, we were just looking a lot better. Jalen Milroe was making the deep passes that he was advertised to be really good at. So I'm
Yeah.
gonna go. I'm definitely gonna go with Bama in this game.
Yep.
I like where they're at right now, and I still think it's gonna be close, but I think Bama's gonna edge it out.
Definitely. If Bama
Yeah,
wants to sneak into this playoffs, they're ranked number 11 right now. They really got to shoot up, man. Like if they really want to get into the playoffs.
yeah. I definitely like this game, and I like to see where it comes out. So, not something we would usually do, but because Vince is missing this episode, he still wants to give his opinion on my game of the week. So he's going to go with Tennessee versus Alabama. And his quote is, Andrew, it's not easy to play in Knoxville in a blackout. So I'm sorry, but it has to be the Vols. So we'll see how that plays out. And hopefully, if Vince is back next week, we'll be able to talk about the outcome of this game. Roll Tide. Hopefully, Alabama can get this win here, but we'll see. And I definitely agree with you, Vince. So moving on to the NBA, we haven't talked about them a lot this season other than the Olympics for next year, but it's preseason and we are 1 week away from the season. So we're first going to start with Luka Doncic, the Mavs all-star star. He's great, but he suffered a calf injury on October 8th during a team workout in Madrid. And it is reported that there's no timetable for return, but he has started light court work. So that could definitely affect this Mavs team who have high hopes for the season. They picked up Kyrie last year, and Luka has always been a bright spot for that team. So any thoughts about the injury?
Yeah, I mean, a calf injury is something. A calf injury is not to be, underestimated. Obviously, a muscle rupture can cause a couple weeks. Anything between like a calf injury, let's say, is one of those injuries that is so unpredictable that you don't know exactly when you will be able to return, especially if that's your dominant leg. So all I have to say is that that calf injury could be, anything.
Yeah, and with the no timetable for return, that definitely proves your point that I don't even know if the Mavs have any idea what it is. So we're kind of gonna need to keep an eye on that, and we don't know right now if he's gonna be ready to start the season. But speaking of guys who we don't know if they're ready to start the season, but for a different reason, James Harden missed another 76ers practice last Saturday or Thursday due to personal matters and will likely not play in the 76ers preseason finale, meaning he will have missed all of preseason and most of the practices the 76ers have run. So reports came in a couple days ago that the Clippers rejected a trade in which they would receive Harden after he requested a trade earlier that year. The Sixers, this is interesting. They were unwilling to trade him, which, first of all, that's something completely separate. But he's missed every preseason game and most of the practices. There's a report earlier in the week before he missed this Thursday practice that he had only gone to like one practice out of the first 10 to 20 or whatever they were running. So, do you think Harden is going to be willing to play to his full potential this year while still stuck with the 76ers?
Yeah, I mean he's getting paid a lot. So if he wants to keep up that good pay, he's probably gonna have to play his best. And if he wants to play his best, if he wants to get that money, he's got to play his best. So I do think Harden's still going to try his absolute best to play for this team. And so what if he wants to get out? Maybe he'll request another trade, and maybe they'll listen next time he requests one. But I do think Harden will still have to play at his full potential.
Yeah, I agree. And we saw the NBA commissioner expressing his disappointment in all the trade requests and stuff that happened over the summer. And with the 76ers especially, it looks like they did try to offer a trade, but the Clippers rejected it. And we did see the Clippers potentially showing some interest in Harden, but I guess that didn't really end up playing out. But another question for you, with under a week left before the 2023-2024 season starts, who do you have in this year's NBA Finals matchup? Because this is definitely not going to be the same league we saw last year.
It's so hard. I mean, with this league this year, you're right. Like it's not the same league as we thought we would see. Um, this league is all about opportunity. When you come into this league, you got to show that you're able to play. With this league, I don't know, this season's tough. I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm gonna say the Los Angeles Lakers sneak into the title this year.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. So, I really only have one team that I think is probably a must to get into the finals this year. The Bucks are looking insane. Giannis's contract is expiring soon, so he's going to have one of those years where he just absolutely goes off to try to prove himself so that he could hopefully make more money. And they picked up a big piece in Dame this year, and we've seen him already in preseason that they've looked good together on the court, and Dame has looked good starting to step into his role with the Bucks. So I think the Bucks are definitely a must to get into the finals, but I don't really have another team. I think it's going to be all very hit or miss for a lot of these teams. So I don't
Right.
think there's anyone who I think is definitively going to get in there. I don't even know about the Bucks. They look good, but we've seen in other sports, like with the Bruins last year breaking a ton of records, they didn't make it past the first round. So we're
Yeah.
looking at these guys this team who could potentially break a ton of records. And I don't know, but there's a
Bucks
bunch
do
of
look
other good
promising this season.
yeah. And there's a bunch of other good teams that we're going to talk about in upcoming episodes. I'm sure Vince wants to talk more about his Heat and their kind of disappointing offseason, but how they could potentially do upcoming. So in a couple weeks, we'll be talking about the NBA again. Don't worry. Moving on to the MLB, because it is still postseason time and we are deep into the championship series now. So we're going to give some quick updates on the ALCS and NLCS. So in the ALCS, the Astros have come roaring back and have now taken a 3-2 series lead in the ALCS thanks to a late home run in yesterday's game by Jose Altuve. Tensions also rose in that game after Dulce Garcia, Dusty Baker, and more were thrown out after the benches cleared following a hit by pitch. The Rangers and the Astros will play the potentially deciding game Sunday night, so we may have an AL champion when this episode comes out. Moving over to the NLCS, the Diamondbacks have come back in their series, evening it at 2-2. Both wins came at home. The first a walk-off, and the second a go-ahead run in the eighth. Each winning run in each game was credited to Craig Kimbrel, one of the best closers in baseball. So he's looked shaky over the last couple games. A fourth game in the series will be played at Arizona tonight, but one more game will potentially be needed to round out the series. So I just want to quickly talk about some off-season rumors. Jack, I don't know how much you'll want to say about this, but there's potential for Juan Soto to be traded this offseason, after the blockbuster trade the Padres had last summer to acquire him. They looked very shaky this year. We said that they didn't even make the playoffs, and they've won the highest payrolls in the MLB. So I'm going to say that they definitely are going to trade him. And I think the Yankees actually are a viable option. My Yankees have a lot of prospects who they're not really using, and we definitely need the outfield help because I don't know if Giancarlo Stanton, a very power first, slow guy is gonna be our best bet in left field or whatever. So I think it's worth it for Brian Cashman to go out and potentially make a Juan Soto trade, especially if we're gonna be dropping some of the guys that may have a lot of payroll that we kind of picked up throughout the season, like Jake Bowers, we're paying a good amount per year, and all these other guys. And I think an outfield with Juan Soto, Jason Dominguez when he's healthy again, and Aaron Judge will be absolutely lethal. So I'm looking to see Brian if he can make a trade this offseason.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Soto could be a possible option for the Yankees, as the rumors are going around right now that Soto might get traded. And I definitely agree with you, Andrew. I feel like the Yankees are a very valuable option for Juan Soto to go to.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And then another thing for the Yankees I just want to talk about real quick for this offseason. There's a pitcher in Japan named Yamamoto who a lot of teams have been looking at. Once again, it looks like it's going to be a race between the Giants and the Yankees here. But we had a very shaky rotation last year and it was riddled by injuries. We were supposed to have the quote best rotation in the league, and that definitely did not end up happening. So hopefully, if we can get healthy and potentially sign this guy, we would have Yamamoto, Cole, Cortez, um, Rodon, all these guys, which would be a ridiculously good pitching staff, which I would really, really like to see. So, Cashman, again, we got to look out to make these moves. And I think the Yankees really do have a lot of potential, especially if Judge does not get hurt again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of I'm a little upset. I'm just gonna go off track real quick. I'm a little upset with my New York Mets for not making the playoffs this year, especially trading their two best pitchers and Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. You know, I'm just a little disappointed. Last season we had such a great season. Unfortunately, we were knocked down in the first round by the Padres. But hopefully next season, greater things will come. Hopefully, we'll get it together and make the postseason like we did last season.
Yeah, and just going back to the ALCS and NLCS real quick. Both these are both these matchups are quite tight at the moment. And we have the Astros actually taking the lead in the ALCS after, and it looks like the Rangers are kind of losing some momentum, even though the game was quite close yesterday. Do you have a pick for who's going to be moving on? Because we didn't get your picks last week. I said the Rangers, and my friend Dylan said the Rangers when he was on. So, who do you have in the series now that's at 3-2?
I'm gonna say the Rangers too. They have a lot of talent on this team. Again, the Astros are also a great team, but I don't think it's Astros year this year. I think the Rangers are rising to the top. So yes, I'm gonna go Rangers to move on to the next round.
Yeah, and in like the first or second episode, we were talking about World Series favorites there, and I said the Rangers because they really did look good, and then they started to slow down. So we've seen already with this Rangers team that they've been kind of picking up and slowing down over the course of the season. So I think that they'll be able to pick it back up in this series, especially because the Astros, who are usually a very, very consistent team, have looked shaky this season. I mean, they did get swept by the Yankees, who at one point were under 500 this year. And we never sweep the Astros, and we haven't in years, especially with the worst team we've had in years. So I think that the Astros are going to kind of crumble there. I think the Rangers are going to be able to pull this one out, and I'd like to see how they continue with the series. So, talking about the NLCS, we also don't have your pick for that. That one's even at 2-2, so really anything can happen right now. I said the Phillies. My friend Dylan said the Phillies, but we both agreed that the Diamondbacks had the ability to take this series, and we'll never know what's happening. So, who do you have, especially now with the Diamondbacks gaining a lot of momentum?
Yeah, but the Diamondbacks are good right now. They're currently ranked number 4 in power rankings for the MLB, and Phillies are ranked number 1, obviously. But I just think this. Unfortunately, I'm saying this as a New York Mets fan. I just think this Philadelphia Phillies team has so much talent. I'm gonna go Phillies on this one. I'm gonna say they go. I don't know, but I'm gonna say they go to the World Series this season.
All right, that definitely an interesting take. So then, if that would be your Rangers. If the Rangers would also be in the World Series with them, who do you have winning the World Series then?
I don't know. I would really like to see a Rangers upset. I really would. So you know what? I'm gonna take some faith in here. I'm gonna say the Rangers could beat the Phillies um in the World Series.
Yeah, I think if the Phillies do end up advancing, I think that's going to be a tight series. But I don't, if the Diamondbacks end up somehow beating the Phillies, I'm sure you'd be happy about that. I don't know if Arizona currently has enough talent to beat a team like the Rangers. The Rangers are a young team too, and it would definitely be a battle of two young teams. But there's definitely a lot of leadership also within the Rangers team, like Corey Seager, Adolis Garcia. Those guys have shown a lot of passion and help lead this team throughout the last little bit. So I think the Rangers are just a little more experienced. So I think they would be able to edge out the Diamondbacks. But I definitely like to see a Rangers Phillies matchup. But then if that doesn't end up happening, what do you think about a World Series rematch from last year?
I definitely think it's possible. You know, the it was Astros Phillies last year, if I'm being correct,
Yep,
right?
yep,
Yeah. So
yep.
the Astros again, they're playing the Rangers right now. It's already a very tough um series for both teams. But I could definitely see it. It's very possible. Um, but I just think this Rangers team has a lot of talent. So that's why I'm gonna say the Rangers will beat the Astros in this series. But I still think it's possible that the Astros can make it to the World Series again, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. So at the end of every episode, we have the fast fact. And today's fast fact, as I said earlier, we talked a lot about the Olympics in the last couple of episodes, but we are going back to the Olympics, but not the 2024, the 2028 Summer Games in LA. So on Wednesdays, the breaking news came that flag football will officially be played in LA during the 2028 Olympics. Over the span of those days, headlines reached billions of phones in the USA, and they said that they'd be willing to send some NFL players to represent them, like Tyreek Hill and many more. So Vince does have a lot of insight to say about flag football when he comes back, hopefully next week. So we're going to be able to hear a lot more about that. But there was some speculation on whether or not NFL players or former NFL players were going to be able to play in the flag football for the US flag football team, especially because it's kind of at the height of training camp and the height of preseason. We've seen baseball players play in the WBC during spring training, and same for where we see hockey players go to the Winter Olympics and they take breaks and stuff like that. So that is definitely a question. Do you think they'll allow the NFL players to take the time and go play flag football?
I do. I mean, if you're gonna allow NFL players, or if you want the flag football to be implemented into the Olympics, you have to have your best of the best to compete in the Olympics. Tyreek Hill, like you said, was an example. Um, he might already be retired by the time, but um, definitely, I think they should let NFL players do it because obviously you need the best of the best in order to win the Olympics.
Ooh, he might be already retired at that time. That's an interesting take, but we could talk more about that later. I think that it's definitely quite overpowered with NFL players being able to play in the Olympics, especially because we are literally the only country in the world that actually plays football, this football at least, American football. So I think that was also another reason they're considering it, not just injury and stuff like that. It would be very overpowered for Team USA to be able to play these guys in the Olympics. So do you think that's something that they may take into account?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at soccer also, if you're saying that America might overpower everybody, that is probably definitely going to happen. 'Cause, you have the CFL, you have the Australian Football League, but it's nothing like American football, like NFL. But anyways, it's like think of soccer as an example. Soccer, obviously Europe. runs all over the USA with soccer because soccer's not our main sport. Now think of that with football. We'll run all over other countries with football because that's mainly our main sport, you know? So if you put it into perspective, I definitely feel like they may not have limits because but I definitely do feel like we could dominate the entire world with football.
Yeah, but the thing with soccer, and I get your point, but soccer is played by it may be not our sport, but it's the sport of literally every other country in the world. So you can't really say the same for football. And I think that they are definitely going to have to look into how to restrict NFL players because I think it's a good thing that they added it, but I just think it's going to be kind of boring if we are literally just dominating and everything. Like get some high school kids in there or something. Like get the youth to play in it. Don't go for the NFL players who are just absolutely going to destroy literally every other country.
Right. Yeah. No, I see your point. As I'm thinking about my idea now, I definitely feel like players, people who have never really played American football, are probably going to get obliterated by people who have.
Yeah.
That's why I'm seeing your point. If we want to balance it out, maybe I don't. This is just a thought. This is just a thought. Like, what if
Yeah.
at least to balance it out? What if a player from America plays for England or something? It's probably not going to happen. It's just a thought. But I don't know. It could be used to balance it out more, or just maybe put college kids, like freshman college players, on that team.
Yeah, and another thing, there are certainly NFL players who come from other countries who would be probably willing to play for their home country if NFL players do have the ability to play. So that's another interesting thing, but they are definitely mostly American. So it would be something that would be a little interesting. And another thing about football, especially like American versions of football around the world, Australian football and Canadian football are different from American football. So with with Canadian football, they have the goalposts in a different place. Australian football, I don't even know what's going on when I watch that. So they are going to have to choose a type of football. I'm going to assume they're going to go with American rules, but that is
Yeah,
also going to
definitely.
be it's going to be different for Canadian players or Australian players or teams that maybe play in other countries but have different rules.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare it to Canadian football, like you're saying, goalposts are in the front of the end zone instead of the back. Wide before the snap, wide receivers run up to the line of scrimmage before the ball is snapped. There's only 3 downs in Canadian football, so yeah, I definitely feel like they'll go with American football on this one.
Yeah, and the other thing that um I'm realizing now is there is actually already a US national flag football team. So if this were to happen and they allow the NFL, are they just going to be kicking these guys off the national team like when they go to the Olympics?
I mean, may you never know because they could be used as backups. They could be used as substitutions. I don't know. It could happen, but maybe they'll keep the majority of the players and maybe get 1 or 2 NFL players just to balance it out.
Yeah, and the other thing is there are tryouts for this national team. So like anyone could just go and try out. And if NFL players are just going to try out for the national team, it could, I think, get a little insane because it would be fun because it's like all these guys kind of going back to a combine again, but for flag football, which honestly I wouldn't mind seeing.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL Combine's always fun. I don't know if it is. Just correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know if this national team's like tryouts are televised because I would love to watch a national televised combine, basically.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. I'm sure they would figure out a way to get some publicity out of that. But um it's not really going to be the same rules I know for flag football when we are talking about the rules. It's not going to be like Canadian football or American football, but I think they are going to have to cater to one country's rules. And I
Right.
think because it's an American sport, they're going to go with American football. But the
Yeah.
games are definitely way quicker, also, which kind of will provide, and especially with super fast guys like Tyreek Hill, if he's even still playing at that point, that gives him just even more of an opportunity just to absolutely go off without having to worry about getting tired towards the end of the game.
Right. Right. Definitely.
So that's pretty much it for this episode of the Sports Coverage Podcast. I can't believe we're already on episode 11. Guys, hopefully Vince will be back next week. And if not, we'll have another great guest for you. Thank you so much, Jack, for coming on the podcast. As
My
always, he
pleasure.
will be linked. He will be linked in the description. Jack Talks Jets. Go check him out. Thank you,
Uh-huh.
everyone, for listening. Follow the
Thank
Instagram,
you.
subscribe, like, all that kind of stuff, and we'll see you next week.